we're not judging whether or not the intervention that's being tested works. What we're interested in is the ability of the platform to deliver a rigorous test of an intervention.
You're listening to Enrollment Growth University from Helix Education, the best professional development podcast for higher education leaders looking to grow enrollment at their college or university. Whether you're looking for fresh enrollment growth techniques and strategies, or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to Enrollment Growth University, a proud member of the Connect EDU podcast network. I'm Eric Olson with Helix Education, and we're here today with Mark Schneider, Director of the Institute of Education Sciences. Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Really excited to have you and talk with you today about the X Prize coming to education research. But before we dig in, can you give the listeners a little bit of background on IES and your role there?
Well, I'm the director of the Institute of Education Sciences, IES. We're a science agency that's housed in the U.S. Department of Education. We are one of the leading investors in education research in the United States and probably in the world.
Love it. And couldn't be more excited to talk with you about this. Mark, maybe to kick us off today, many of our listeners are likely familiar with the X Prize, designed to incentivize moonshot innovations, literally in some cases, but they may not know that the X Prize has now come to and for education. Can you tell us about the Digital Learning Challenge X Prize and how it came to be?
It'd be my pleasure. Yes, everybody knows the X Prize, and actually, there are many prize organizations out there, that we could have gone with, but I think, as you know, everybody knows what the X Prize is. It encourages moonshots, literally. And I thought that we could use the X Prize and the cachet of the X Prize as a means of spurring on new kinds of innovation in education research. So basically, we believe in the strongest evidence possible, and the way in which the gold standard has been set for research is randomized controls trials, RCTs. And I think people are probably familiar with RCTs, especially from medical research, where you have a treatment group and a control group, and the random patients, students, schools are randomly assigned to either those two groups. And if the random assignment is done correctly, then any observed outcome differences can be attributed to the treatment. So this is we've been doing randomized control trials, RCTs, in medicine for a century. Yeah. That came to the U.S. Education system in the strongest way possible in 2002 when IES was set up. But the problem with RCTs in education is that they're hard to recruit students, they're hard to recruit schools. Yeah. Often leadership changes and the new leaders say, why are we doing this? Yeah. I have other priorities, et cetera. And they're long and they're expensive. So they're usually 5 years and $5 million. And even though we're a large investor in education research, we only do one or two trials on a subject area. Yeah. And, at the end of the day, most of, just in medicine, pharmaceuticals, most things don't work. So we've now done one trial on, say, a math program. Doesn't work. We've spent 5 years, $5 million. And the contrast, of course, is to what's just gone on with regard to the COVID vaccine. We've done, a lot more money, of course, but we ran multiple trials, multiple times, and came up with, the winning hand. But what would have happened if we had done, let's just do Pfizer for 5 years. That didn't work. Let's do Moderna for 5 years. Let's do et cetera, et cetera. You can't just do one trial, wait for the results, do another trial, wait for the results, et cetera. So the digital learning platform challenge seemed to me to be a way to speed up the way in which we do experiments. So there are many platforms out there, digital platforms, that have at least 100,000, sometimes way more than that, students on them. And so the question was, can we get the industry that runs these platforms to imagine doing the equivalent of RCTs using the digital platform? So if we do that, if this works, and I'm pretty sure it will, by the way, what we could do is we could run multiple experiments across multiple platforms. And what will happen is that some of them will work, some of them won't work, right? But the ones that work, what we'll then know is that, well, here, this is a platform that works. It's delivered an experiment. the evidence says that this intervention works. But we're going to get that information in relatively short order. And then, critically important to the prize is that you then have to replicate that experiment. So replication is one of the most important things that we do in science, right? We say, hey, it worked for this group of people. Does it work for that group of people? I mean, we can see this right now, right? We started with above 65 people getting the injection, and now we're down to, well, does it work for 12 to 18-year-olds? So we're now expanding the populations by replicating tests across different groups. So this is so part of the prize is based on the ability of the platform to identify interventions that work and then replicate it at least in five different populations. So if it worked in New York City, does it work in upstate New York? If it worked for low-income Black kids in Philadelphia, does it work for Hispanic kids in Philadelphia or New York? So we need to identify promising interventions. Then we need to replicate them, because it's only through replication that we will be able to get the proper fit between what works for whom under what conditions.
Mark, that historical background of the existing constraints of education research that we've been under for so long is incredibly helpful. Higher education specifically has been talking about the outcomes promise of technology being able to solve everything. AI, machine learning, it's going to solve everything for years now. I'm curious from your position, is it we have not found that solve yet because of the constraints you mentioned in terms of the size, the scope, the scale of the platforms? We can't learn quickly enough. Or is it that the technology is not strong enough yet? Which do you think it is? And is this X Prize going to be something that helps us answer that question?
Well, actually, what I hope it is mobilizing an industry. So we have close to 100 companies that have now put their names into the hopper as being interested in this digital learning challenge.
Beautiful.
Okay, again, almost 100 companies. Now, many of them will look at the next step, which is, now you have to start doing documentation and you have to start explaining why you should be considered for the X Prize, et cetera. And we'll winnow it down, right? I mean, this happens. Some companies will look at the next wave and just say, hey, look, I don't have the time, the money to invest in this gamble, quite frankly. So, some of them will disappear. Maybe we'll get 25 or 30 to get into the next round, and then we'll get down to 15 or so for the final round, and then we're anticipating about 5 finalists, and then the winner. So part of what the X Prize does is really mobilize an industry, right? It mobilizes people who are sort of like, hey, I'm doing a platform to do business processes across school districts in the United States, but I have a lot of schools. So maybe I could pivot my platform to run experiments. That's what this is all about. It's really trying to mobilize an industry to expand, to try the moonshot. So do I think that AI-enabled interventions have a promise? Of course. So we are going to invest in AI-enabled intelligent tutoring. And these are going to be partnerships, I hope, we're still working out the details, with the National Science Foundation to do 2 AI institutes, one on intelligent tutoring and the other one on special education. So not over-medicalizing the way we approach special ed, but we know that AI has made enormous progress in helping doctors diagnose problems and identifying appropriate treatments. And again, I have 3 grandchildren who are in various stages of special education, so I'm very sensitive to the needs and the terms that we use. But the fact of the matter is, if we could help schools and professionals diagnose, assess special education needs, and then come up with appropriate treatments, that's a major step forward. For about 14% of American students have special needs.
I love those examples, Mark. You seem excited about AI tutoring specifically. Any other examples of the kinds of tests and experiments that you expect these companies that have put their hat in the ring are going to come with, or that you're hoping to see from entrants?
Well, so we're running about 3 or 4 different activities. The X Prize is the most visible one. We're a science agency, so we're just trying to figure out the most efficient way for science to move into the modern world. quite frankly, for education science to move into the modern world. So and to do that, we obviously need to think about a couple of things, and that is, what companies have the ability to move into the area. How do we support them? But most importantly, how do we test the efficacy of what they're bringing to the table? And for us, it's all about efficacy, proof of effectiveness. Scaling up is a critical challenge, right? So we want these companies not only to prove that they could work in a defined population, but can you scale this up? Can you bring this to scale? Could you affect thousands, hundreds of thousands of students? And that is a major challenge. And we're hoping to use our resources to invest more in scaling up.
Yeah, let's talk about efficacy specifically as it relates to determining a winner here. What does winning look like? What sort of outcomes will it likely take for a group to win? And how is that winner determined?
So there's an expert panel that XPRIZE has recruited to actually make the judgment calls. I mean, I could tell you what my vision is, and they will develop the concrete guidelines and questions, metrics to do this. So for me, the winner is one that, and again, we're not judging whether or not the intervention that's being tested works. What we're interested in is the ability of the platform to deliver a rigorous test of an intervention. So this means identifying a treatment and control group or multiple treatment groups, right? Specifically manipulating manipulation is a strong word. And like when we want to be careful that we're talking about manipulation of an intervention, not manipulating students, right? So keep that in mind. So we're going to deliver a treatment, a math program, for example. We're going to do that. We're going to see how well it works. What are the metrics by which we're measuring how well it works? They have to be standard metrics. They can't be something that the developer, or the program, the digital learning platform owner created. It has to be a standard metric. We have to see the capacity of that company to look at the data, analyze the data, figure out the evidence of effectiveness, and then run 5 replications. Then, in the ideal world, we don't have enough time to do this. In the ideal world, they would run those replications again, right? But each time you run the replication, you take the information that you've learned from the original test and the 5 replications to identify what the path forward is for further replications. We're not asking them to do the further replications, but they have to show us how they would use the data from the first and second round, the original test and the 5 replications, to identify the areas in which, or the populations in which, they will be doing the next round of tests. So it's the ability to deliver a test, to do the replications based on evidence from the original test, plan, but not necessarily execute the next round of replications. And all of this is designed to identify, to use the words that we use all the time here at IS, what works for whom under what conditions.
Mark, you've spoken honestly and critically about the traditionally slow pace of educational research design in this country and some of the inherent constraints that make that happen. What are your hopes for what this prize might do or jumpstart for educational research culture as a whole?
Well, we have to be faster, better, cheaper, right? Mm-hmm. There's a joke, faster, better, cheaper. Tell me which 2 you want. You can't do all 3. Yeah. Well, I still hope we could do all 3.
Mark, finally, can you give us a call to arms for those listening, excited about this $1 million purse? Perhaps they're part of organizations that are interested in participating, or they've already thrown their hat in the ring. Where should they go next to learn more?
They can contact me directly, or they can go to the XPRIZE, which has a portal for accepting applications. A call to arms. I think we just did that for 20 minutes.
Yes, we did. I'm excited. I'm ready to bear arms for this cause.
Great.
If they're interested in contacting you or your team directly, Mark, what's the best contact place for them to go?
Mark.Schneider, Schneider, @ed.gov.
Awesome. Mark, good luck, and thanks so much for joining us today.
It was my pleasure. Good talking to you. Bye now.
Attracting today's new post-traditional learners means adopting new enrollment strategies. Helix Education's data-driven, enterprise-wide approach to enrollment growth is uniquely helping colleges and universities thrive in this new education landscape. And Helix has just published the second edition of their Enrollment Growth Playbook with 50% brand new content on how institutions can solve today's most pressing enrollment growth challenges. Download it today for free at helixeducation.com/playbook.
You've been listening to Enrollment Growth University from Helix Education. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.